Now I will walk you through how you edit questions and create new ones in our question editor. You do that over here by pressing the questions in the menu panel. So here you have the overview of all your questions in your questionnaire. It's an ordered list of questions and all the questions are managed in here. So to the left over here, the numbers you see here on top is the order that the questions are in. The pre-existing questions are in tens, as you see, 50, 60, 70, 80, and so on. And this is simply to make it easier for you when you add new questions, because then you don't have to change the entire order every time you add a new question. So the tens are simply to make it easier for you. Of course, it's in descending order, so the lower the number it has, the higher in the questionnaire it will come. To the right, you can see what competences the questions are related to. For example, you can see that storage options are related to 3 competences. This is just to give you an overview of what competences they're related to. You can see those in here. You will also be able to see it in more detail when we go into the question. The last thing I'm going to show you before we're going to go through the specific questions are the filterable questions that I talked about in the report module. So we'll go to the end here. You can see all the questions here that has this little funnel. When the question has a funnel, it means that it is filterable in results and that is filterable in the reports. So this is just how you identify whether a question is filterable or not. So now I'm going to go through question editing with you guys, and I think the easiest way to do it is to just clone a question and try and do it. So we're just going to go into file formats. Why not? I'm going to click the question, and this is where all the editing happens. So we're just going to clone the question. You do that by pressing the little arrow over here. Then you press clone question. It asks you whether you are sure. Say okay. And now it has cloned the question. So you can see here, now it has immediately made a clone of the file formats question. So we're going to press that. And then you can see we have all these different tabs here. So we're going to go through all the tabs. And when you are editing your questions or adding new ones, you can always press the preview button, and then you will see exactly how the question looks like in action, or for what you say. But then you can always see how the layout will look like. So use the preview button, it's really helpful. Anyway, so in the basic tab, here you can change the order. You can change where in the survey a question appears. All questions are labeled with a number, which dictates their place in the order of questions. Simply change the number and then you change the placement. So for example, in this case, we don't want it to be 70 because then it's the same as the cloned one. So we want it to be 71, for example. Here you can also give it a title. The title given to a question appears both on the question and in the question table to the left when answering the survey, as well as in the results and the report generator. Give your question a title that makes sense to users in both the backend and front end of your platform, because then you make sure that everybody collectively understands. So for the sake of this, we're just going to call it test question, right? For example. Down here is where you edit the actual text part of the question. The content will usually be the main question or statement, and sub-content can be like an example or an explanation to help your user understand the question. The bottom content is optional, but it's typically used to elaborate on how the user should think about the question, for example. So You can, for example, see we have text in both content and sub-content, which looks, for example, like this. If you write something here, we'll just write test. Press the preview button, just saved, press the preview, and then you can see the bottom comes here. So that is how it works in the basic tab. When editing your content, you can use, now it's enabled here, but if you see here, you can press enable formatter. And here you can then format the content to your liking. Just like in regular typing programs, you can also insert quotes, tables, and media. And embedding media, I'm going to explain to you how that works now. If you want to insert an image or a video as part of your question, you can easily do that. You do that with an embedded code. So this means that your media, like whether it's pictures, whether it's PDF files, links, videos, so on, they has to be hosted somewhere. For a video, that could, for example, be on YouTube or like a similar site for images. And to embed the media, for example, to embed video, you click the play button, which is this one, in the text formatter, and then you will just be asked to insert the source. Here you simply insert the URL of the video that you want to insert. The same thing applies if you want to do links. You simply put in the URL. So this is, for example, if you want to embed PDFs or anything like that, or as like other links, if you want to redirect people to a specific website or anything, you do that by pressing the little link thing over here. Embedding images are a little bit different. So in most cases, you can simply just copy the image directly into the question. If that doesn't work for some reason, then you copy the HTML code from whatever site you're using to host the image. Then you go to your content, and then you simply disable the formatter and insert the code bit, and then the picture should appear. But most often than not, you can just copy it into the question. But it is really important that the pictures are not hosted locally on your computer. It has to be hosted somewhere, so it has a URL or an HTML code of some sort. So that's how you do it. Let's move on to the settings tab. So in the settings format, first of all, this is where you can choose whether a question is filterable or not. If it's filterable, it becomes a variable that you can filter your data on when generating reports. Usually, filter questions are used to gather like background information on your data. So common filter questions would be things like age, gender, department, so on. So you do that here. Right now it's disabled because it doesn't make sense to have the test question as a filterable question. Here you can choose whether or not you want the question to be locked. If you lock a question, the respondents won't be able to go back and change their answer once they've clicked on an option. Depending on your project, there can be different pros and cons in doing this, but if you're doing a self-assessment, we'd usually recommend leaving the questions unlocked because this allows the respondents to change their answers upon further reflection. But this is where you log it. So next to the log question, you can set a correct score. So this field is only relevant if you want the respondent to know if there's a right or wrong answer to the question. If so, then input the score that equals a correct answer. So a tip for this is that this setting is usually used together with the option score setting on each option. We'll go through that in a minute. But just note that the correct score is the correct total score, which means that if a respondent can select multiple answers on a question, the total score should be distributed evenly between the options. So for example, if you set the total score to 100 and the question requires the respondent to select 2 right options, both of them should be scored at 50. So that is how the correct score works. So below this, we have the option help text. This setting lets you input text in the options section to help the respondent answer the questions validly. So this could, for example, be choose 2 of the following options or something like that. Next to this, we have the minimum and maximum selectable options. And here you can choose how many options a respondent is able to select on a given question. On regular self-assessment questions on statements about like ability, both minimum and maximum would usually be 1. But you might want to have a question where it makes sense for the respondent to be able to select multiple answers. So this is just where you select how many options they're allowed to choose on that given question. Below that, we have the layout of options. So this setting lets you choose from several templates for how you want the options to a given questions laid out. So just try them out and then use the preview function, and then you can figure out what works best for you. So we're just going to try one of them. So we're going to do wrappable boxes, for example, instead. I'm going to preview. And now it instead looks like this. So the layout options, try them out, try the different templates, see what you like the best, and then it should work fine. The maximum width of all options determines the maximum width of all the options in pixels layout-wise. So this is where you can change that. Besides this, we have the auto confirm. So this setting lets you choose whether respondents are automatically directed to the next question when they have given their answer, or whether they need to manually confirm that they've answered and are ready to move on. So if you set it to automatic, as soon as a person chooses one of the options, they go straight to the next question. If you have the manual confirmation, they have to press a button to move on to the next question. So that is simply what this does. Then we have the display timer setting. So if you want to time your respondents on how long they take to answer a question and make the timer visible to them, you can activate this timer. Besides this, we have the end survey setting. If a given question, for example, the test question we're on now, needs to be the end of the survey, you can activate this setting here. The last question in the general order will automatically have this setting turned on, but maybe you would want a different question to be the last one for like a specific group or something, or some respondents, and then this is where this setting might come in handy. A little tip is that this setting is often used in combination with the Jump to question setting in the Options Advanced tab. Now we're going to move on to the Options tab. So this is the Options tab. And as you see in the Options tab, we have 2 mini tabs. So we have a Basic tab and an Advanced tab in the Options tab. So we're going to go through the basic one first. Here you can give it an option title. This is the main descriptor of the option, yes, no, always, etc. Besides that, you have the option help text. You can use the help text if you need to elaborate on an option to make sure the respondent understands the selection. And below that, you set the order. If you don't put anything here, the options will just be listed in the order in which they appear in the editor. So if you just didn't fill out any of these, the top one will automatically be the top option and so on. Otherwise, the option with the lowest number will be listed first. Here's also where you can set the option score. This setting determines the score a respondent will get from selecting a given option. In the original MapUs framework, the digital competence wheel, each option on the answering scale is given a score between 0 and 100. And a high score impacts the final overall digital competence score more positively. You can also give options a negative score, which would impact the total score negatively. This makes sense if you're working with questions that have directly wrong answers, as opposed to less right, good, strong answers. So in self-assessment, it wouldn't normally make sense to set any negative scores. A little tip is when used together with the correct score setting, you can create actual test questions where the respondent is told whether they answered right or wrong. So this is actually a really cool feature if you use those two combined. Note that scores do not make sense on filter questions. So unless you're filtering on something different than neutral background variables like age, gender, title, etc., then the option score does not make sense. Besides the option score, we have the add icon. So if you want to add like a visual to go with the option, in this case, we have stars. But you can choose yourself which icon you want. MapUs is connected to the icon database called Font Awesome, and you have access to their selection of I think they have over 1,500 icons to choose between. And all you need to do is go to fontawesome.com, find the icon you want, and then copy the icon key, for example, FAS, FA/star, and then you insert it into MapUs right here, and then it should change the icon. So you can choose what icon you want yourself. Moving along to the Advanced tab, go through here. Here you can set the responsive width. So the responsive width is just, you can set it with Bootstrap grid layout if you want to. Then you can also add a text response. This setting lets you add a text field in the options so that the respondent answers by typing. It's usually used if you want to include an other option or perhaps want respondent to describe something in their answer. A tip is that it does not work with the rating option layout. If you want the rating option layout and you want respondents to be able to elaborate on their answer on a rating question, you just create a new question like directly following the rating one, and then they can type here. Then you also need to note that whatever text respondent input will be stored as data. To avoid any troubles regarding storage of personal data, please be mindful of how you use this function. Then we have image URL. If you want to add an image to an option, you can simply just take the image URL and from whatever site you're using to host it, and then you insert the URL in this field, and then the image should appear. Then we have the jump to question. In some cases, you might want different groups of respondents to be presented with different versions of your survey, depending on their answers. So an example could be if you have a specific section of your survey which is only relevant to some and not all of your respondents. If they get a certain answer on a certain question, this setting activates a jump function on this option which directs respondents to the next question you deem relevant to them. So here you can choose between all the questions in the entire row of questions, and then if someone chooses a specific option within a question, you can make them jump to a specific question. Lastly, you can type in feedback. If you want respondents to receive feedback, if they select a certain option, for example, good job or wrong answer or try again or something, you can use this setting and input whatever feedback you would like. Lastly, I'm going to show you related competences. So if we press the Related Competences tab, this is where you control which competences a given question is related to. So which competence scores are affected by the answer on a given question. All you have to do is choose the competence in the white search bar. So you can see here that because this is a clone, it will of course have the same competences as the one we cloned. But here we, for example, have information, production, storage, production and sharing, and knowledge. So these are all the competences that are related to this specific question. And you can choose yourself which competences you want this question to be related to. The last thing I'm going to show you in question building is the safety mechanism in regarding deletion. So deleting a question, you press the little arrow over here, and this is both where you clone the question and it's also where you can delete one. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the test question that we just made. What you do is you press delete, and then the safety mechanism is that you actually have to type in delete if you really want to delete it. So it's quite a literal safety mechanism. So we're going to write delete, we're going to press OK, and now the question is deleted. So still be mindful of how you delete, but there is a safety mechanism in place. So that was question building.